Good evening, everybody. Welcome to today's meeting of the Place and Economic Development Committee. This is a public meeting and members of the public and press are permitted to report on the proceedings. Reporting includes filming, photographing, making an audio recording and providing commentary on proceedings. Please note this meeting is recorded and streamed live. These recordings are published on the relevant meeting page of the Council's website. By choosing to attend this public meeting, you are deemed to have given your consent to being filmed or recorded and for any footage to be broadcast or published. If the alarm sounds, the premises must be evacuated immediately. Do not spend time collecting personal belongings. All emergency escape routes are clearly signed, and once you have left the building, the assembly point is in the High Street opposite the Guildhall. Members and other speakers are reminded to use their microphone when speaking. Finish talking, they switch their microphones off. Thank you very much. So for the first agenda item, we have apologies and appointments of substitutes.
Thank you, Chair. We have no substitutes this evening, but we do have apologies from Councillor Riaz. Thank you.
Do we have any declarations of interest? No declarations of interest. And we have no public participation this evening. If I may then just go through page by page the minutes from the last meeting. Any issues, questions, points to make on page 1? No, thank you. Page 2. Nope. Page 3. Thank you. Page 5. And that's it. Thank you very much. Can we just move on to the first item of the agenda then, which is the Worcester Play Plan progress report? So.
Thank you, Chair. I'll introduce the item and then Alan is here as well to take us through some project work in development. So members will recall that in July this year, the committee approved the Worcester Play Plan, which gives us the basis, a spatial document that explores where play investment may be made across the city, but is also hopefully an imaginative and aspirational document about how play might be designed differently to different children and young people in the city. So we've adopted the play plan and clearly we've moved into implementation. You'll recall that some of the decisions that the committee supported related to needing to bring back detailed projects at the business case stage for approval, also an in-principle commitment to allocate £400,000 of our SIL funding to play investment in the future, and to revisit our commitments around maintenance and so forth and prioritise and accelerate those. In terms of the first phase priority projects, the committee endorsed a set of priority projects, some of which had already been approved as budget allocations, but without the detail behind them, and others had emerged from the play plan directly. So there was a sort of mixed portfolio of projects that had been brought forward at ward level and those which were recognised as being necessary on a citywide basis. As far as we can, we're starting to use the language of doorstep, neighbourhood and destination play, because as you'll recall, in a city of our size, the data shows that people do use the whole city for play on a destination basis as well as local play. And the data was very clear on that. So there is obviously a detailed progress report on some of the individual projects that we're progressing, which Alan will take you through. A couple of things I wanted to touch on in terms of doing something at a destination level. You will recall that the data shows quite clearly that we are not making provision for children with disability in the city to a standard that we might aspire to, and that came out loud and clear in the feedback, and that the all best practice would suggest that that needs to be designed on a sort of destination play level, given that people accessing special facilities may require additional support measures such as parking, toilet facilities, decent level of complementary facilities on site. So we've started looking at what that destination play might be, talking to the National Charity Scope, understanding disability standards for play, which is something the government itself is consulting on at the moment, really timely. And we have recognised that this would be quite a significant project for us in terms of fundraising and bringing on board a whole range of stakeholders and partners. So we've started that piece of work, and we would want to bring that back to committee when that's a bit more mature. And then I think that the other point to make is that we do want to bring the committee a kind of decent, detailed delivery plan, which identifies how the funding is going to sit against individual projects, but we're not quite there on that yet. You'll see there's another agenda item tonight that's relevant insofar as we're reporting back on Section 106 spend and availability. That is one stream. Community infrastructure levy is another stream. Third-party grants is another stream. Capital funding and borrowing is another stream. There's a potential opportunity opened up with the Football Foundation, so there's more funding there. So there are a number of funding opportunities, but they do need to be aligned to specific types of play. Haven't quite finished mapping that work yet. So that was my sort of intro in terms of how far we've got. Would it be helpful for Alan just to go through some of the projects in a little bit more detail?
Thank you, Sian. So the 5 short-term projects that we've got that are various stages of being live at the moment. The first one is the project at Cotswold Way, which consists of 3 elements. First of all, it's the play on the way concept. So with this particular location, it's a route through the space. So rather than take a kind of traditional approach of providing a play area in one location, what we're looking at is a number of stations through the route so that children literally do play on the way. And the primary school is located at the end of that route, so the traffic through that space is quite regular through different times of the day. The second element is the environmental enhancements. So our city services team have got a raft of improvements that they're looking to make from an environmental point of view in the kind of peripheral areas of the play space. And that literally kind of consists of 5 phases. So it looks at things like woodland improvements, managing the ecotones, the kind of grading through the verges. It'll be looking at things like installing bat boxes and insect homes, that type of thing, wildflower areas, and also the installation of some interpretation boards, just again to share information. The third element is an opportunity to increase the residential parking in that particular area. The parking is limited at peak times, so it does cause a problem on the site. So there is a third phase on that project which identifies a potential solution to that problem. So we've had some cost estimates in, and that's given us a total kind of estimated budget of 173,000, which consists of the 3 elements and also a 15% contingency. But we're in a position now where we're just about to go out to public consultation on all 3 elements of that project. The second one here is Horizon Hub. Again, this project has 3 elements to it. The first of which is the provision of a youth shelter. And we're looking to install the youth shelter by the end of the year. So time is of the essence really, but we ideally want to get that installed by the end of next month. The other 2 elements relate to the multi-use games area. So first of all, historically, there's been an ongoing problem with the height of the fencing at the 2 goal ends. and on a regular basis balls leave the playing area and go into the school grounds or into the community trust car park, which obviously causes problems. So we're looking to increase the height of the fence in there to prevent that from happening. And then the other element is the resurfacing. So at the moment it's a tarmac surface, and we're looking at putting in a polymeric surface, which just gives a little bit more, it's not such a harsh finish. So if anybody falls onto that surface, it's a little bit more kind of, you know, it just kind of gives more, but it's still acceptable for activities such as basketball, five-a-side, and also we're looking at the opportunity to bring volleyball in as an additional sport into that space as part of the project as well. Then there's also some ancillary works around that, so works such as footpaths, looking at the current lighting on the multi-use games area, and the location of the youth shelter will be very much adjacent to the multi-use games area. So we've had a topographic survey done, and we can fit the new youth shelter in adjacent to the multi-use games area. So again, you know, the two should work quite well together. So from the point of view of funding on that one, we have actually got approval for Section 106 funding. So we're working with a 90k budget on that particular project, and the cost estimates that have come in at the moment, we're confident that we will be within budget on that project as well. The third project is the Batton Hall Park pump track. At the moment, we are currently going through the public consultation process. So that began on the 23rd of October and runs to the 19th of November. So obviously once that closes, we can then gather that information together and see what the general consensus is in terms of the suggested location and the various elements of that scheme. So there's two parts to it, which is the installation of the pump track itself, and then there are also some ancillary improvements around things like benches and information boards and that type of thing as well, just to support that project. The fourth one is the multi-use games area at Green Lane. Now, that one at the moment is just pending an outcome of some work that our estates team are doing with the county council. At the moment, that's a county facility. We're just in the process of transferring the land ownership on that one. We've just got an issue with an easement on a cable that runs through the space that we're just in the process of resolving. But that one is fairly imminent now. And again, that involves a range of works. So there's an existing multi-use games area already on the site. So it looks at just some kind of minor refurbishment works on that. And the main work really is around the whole kind of regrading and landscaping works, putting in provision for cycle stands, new seating, etc. So just really kind of enhancing the space. And then the final one of the five is just a small project in Power Park where we've got an allocation of about 12k just to improve the current provision in that area. So again, just liaise with the ward councillors on what that recommendation kind of looks like. I've had a conversation with the clerk of the parish council, so again, between the conversation with the parish council and the ward councillors, we'll make a decision on what that kind of looks like in terms of enhancement. So that kind of brings us up to speed with the 5 projects that are underway as things stand. In terms of medium-term projects, which we're classifying as kind of 3 to 5 years, but I think we'll probably find in reality that some of those will come forward and begin in an earlier timescale than that. And what we've done so far in terms of mapping the gaps from the Worcester Play Plan is identify a couple of key areas in the city which show considerable shortfall, particularly for provision of facilities for youths. And the first one is the opportunity to do something in Northwick Park in Plains. And the second one is in Lower Wick, in an area of green space just south of Weyburn Close, which is again quite a substantial piece of land, which would allow us to provide new facilities for both young children and youths on the same space. The space is big enough to accommodate both of those facilities in an area that would be far enough away from each other that they wouldn't necessarily conflict. Of course, sometimes, you know, we do get issues with youths using the younger children's provision because they haven't got anything necessarily in an area for themselves. So we'd be looking to provide something in that space for both age groups. Sean touched earlier on also the kind of concept of a new kind of destination play site, kind of all-inclusive, fully accessible. So again, we'll continue the work on that as one of the medium-term projects as well. And a new opportunity that's come on board fairly recently is in conjunction with the Football Foundation. They've launched a new investment programme called Play Zones. And although the Football Foundation are primarily focused on football itself as an activity, they're recognising that the multi-sport approach is really important to their wish to get children more active. Obviously not all children are engaged in football necessarily, so they're starting to widen the remit. And they've identified 4 main groups which have got the greatest inequalities, and again they kind of dovetail very nicely with the findings of the Worcester Play Plan as well. So that's lower socio-economic groups, women and girls, disabled people and people with long-term health conditions, and ethnically diverse communities. So as I say, there's a kind of consistency there. So in terms of the existing estate, we've currently got 44 play areas around the city. The independent play inspector has been in the city literally last week conducting all of the annual condition surveys, and all of that information gets entered into inspection software. We use a system called PSS Live. So that records all the findings of the inspector. It grades the findings on a high, medium and low risk. The latest findings are that we found we'd got 4 high risk areas, 3 of which were in Heather Close and 1 in Cripplegate. And the risk is relating to the depth of the play bark on the site. So Heather Close is currently closed off at the moment while we await the delivery. But there is a national shortage of play bark, believe it or not, at the moment. So as soon as that is delivered, then obviously that will be resolved. In terms of the medium risk, there are 54 which vary from works that need to be completed within a couple of weeks to 6 months or so. So obviously we'll now work our way through all of that work with the works unit to resolve those. But just to put that into context, within PSS Live there are around 1,200 items. So you know that's fairly low level risk in that respect. We've got an annual maintenance budget which has not been spent in its entirety since the pandemic. The pandemic caused some real issues with supply chains. So we have got an accepted and acknowledged backlog of repair work that needs to be carried out. A procurement exercise was underway earlier on this year to resolve some of those issues. However, given the timing of the play inspector's recent visit, it makes more sense to actually just stop on that for the time being, take stock and include the findings of the inspector's recent report within that procurement, because otherwise we're going to go out to procurement on the original one, and then not soon after that we're going to have to go out to procurement on a separate piece of work as well. So the intention will be to take a review of those, bring them all together and go out and deliver it as one piece of procurement. And I think that probably covers everything that I've got in the report tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Sian and Alan, for the report and the detail behind it. Before I open up to other members, if I may just ask a few questions. The age groups that we're targeting on the Play on the Way, how old, what is the age range for that Play on the Way piece in Warndon? On the Baton Hall Park pump track, how firm is the estimate and what contingency have we got built into that budget? And then on Area 51 in Power Park, that allocation of 12k, is that also coming from capital? And on the point you made about Cripplegate being a one-play piece in Cripplegate being high risk, so being a little bit parochial, was that Play Park as well? The age group for the Play on the Way in Warndon.
Yeah, the age group for that will be predominantly children, particularly because the primary school is located at the end of that route. So yes, it will be predominantly.
Sorry, I'll switch my mic on. The rest were Baton Hall pump track. How firm is the estimate? Is there any contingency? Area 51 in Power Park. Where's the allocation of 12k coming from?
In terms of the Power Park one, there is a defined value of 12k, but I think that was identified in the same works as the pump track and that the capital. So that was the figure that was allocated in there. Yeah.
How firm is the estimate for the pump track and what contingency?
The estimate on the pump track at the moment, yes, I mean, you know, we're within budget and we've got additional funding from Section 106 for the ancillary works. So again, we've got a little bit of flexibility in that as well. But ultimately, the budget will determine the size and the length of the track. So we'll work within that budget.
Thank you. I'll open it up to members. Jill?
If I could just ask about the Cotswold Way element. So Play on the Way, I'm sorry if I missed this somewhere. So from where to where is this place?
It starts, if it depends which direction you're moving in, but if you're coming from the primary school end, so from the end of Cranham Drive, where you've got the evangelical church there, that would be the entry point in one direction, and it takes you through to the far end of what is kind of Rodborough Close. So as you start to go out towards the big green space at the far end there, where the housing estate is, so it's literally along that straight strip. It's divided into 4 zones. And then you've got the football pitch that's part way along there as well, so it links everything up into zones.
How is that going to be extracted or put into that consultation? The question works.
Yes, that will be the intention. I mean, I think from the point of view of the consultation documents that were used for that, they will be very similar to what we've used for Baton Hall Park consultation as well. So just in terms of the, the structure, the process, in terms of the information that we gather. But yes, I mean, again, we've gone through the process at Baton Hall Park of asking members for their input. So again, we will be doing the same with ward councillors in that area. Absolutely, yes. Yeah, I mean, once the draft documents are in place, which will be imminently, then obviously we'll be engaging and having that conversation. Yeah.
I'll just ask two more quick questions. Play equipment itself, I've seen a little mock-up that I'm told not to share, so I haven't. I've just seen some little indications what equipment might be. Some of it doesn't really look for very young children, but maybe this is just a selection of things. Will the equipment also be part of the consultation, sort of thing that will be out and available? What you would normally do?
We're keen for the feedback to come through from the local residents. You know, ultimately we want to be making sure that we're providing them with what they require. But from the point of view of the examples you've seen, I don't know which company it was that you were showing, but we've had kind of conversations with 4 very different companies who've come up with different ideas. Again, it's designed to allow children to move through the space freely. So some of it is more challenging, some of it is quite low level. So again, the children have a choice of which pieces that they kind of engage in, but the encouragement is for them to kind of move through that space and almost kind of, you know, let's not touch the grain type thing. Let's stay on the play equipment as much as we can and just enjoy it as they journey through the space.
I think that sounds great. You know, area that doesn't have much. It's a shame there's nothing for older kids, because that is also a big. Could I just ask a final question? Will the car park be part of the consultation? Are we going to ask? Are you going to? I don't know what you found. Proper real quite an investment. The lighting side, could you just clarify who's actually going to be owning this piece? Currently platform, isn't it? Are they going to light it, or is that figure in there?
Yeah, no, if that project was to move forward, then that would involve a land transfer. So it would become the ownership of the city council, and then obviously the council would then also be responsible for the ongoing revenue costs associated to that original investment as well.
Yeah, so I think we need to be sure it's going to be used.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, and lighting, if we are suddenly going to light this, leave that for now.
Yeah, I think the lighting at the moment, we're still looking at what the options are on that, because again, that may have to be solar panel lighting as opposed to mains. So again, there are some restrictions with that, so we're just still looking into that at the moment.
Thanks, Jill. James?
Chair, thanks very much. Excuse me. Some exciting stuff on here in amongst the short-term projects. I mean, I'm particularly delighted, obviously, with Cotswold Way, and but that may not have made it onto this document, actually, had it not been for Owen Clearer's persistence in making sure that it was. The question is, we all looked a little while ago at documents relating to provision of play for children of various ages across the city, and we were struck, I'm sure, by the disparity between that's available for younger children and that's available for older children. If this document simply becomes a reality, you know, in its entirety, as it were, to what extent is that addressed?
The projects that we're looking at the moment, in terms of the particularly the medium-term projects, they pretty much fully address the shortfall. So if we were to deliver projects such as the 2 that I mentioned before, like at Northwick and at Weyburn Close, there's also an opportunity at Gallivelt Park There's a shortfall at the moment in St Clement's ward. So once Keepax Bridge is opened, which is due to be the back end of next year, subject to weather conditions, then that would open up that side of the city to Gallivant Park. So there's an opportunity there. Obviously, at the moment, we've got play provision in the park for younger children. We've got the tennis courts. What we have lost in Gallivant in recent times is obviously the basketball court, and there is a clear lack of provision for youths in that area. So that's another project that would address that shortfall of youth provision in the city.
Thank you, James.
Thanks, Chair. It was, I'm really glad to hear about, obviously, that you're investigating some provision for older children, young people in that area, because obviously within the St Clement's area we haven't been able to accommodate that because of the space available. But my question was about the revenue budget, and you talked about a backlog of works, and I wondered what's the scale of the backlog of works to our 44 sites, the current provision?
It's fairly significant as things stand at the moment, as I say, as I kind of intimated earlier, because of the issues caused by the pandemic and the supply chain and everything. So there is a reasonably significant backlog. So it's a case of us now working through that, prioritising where we're going to put that investment. Also the time from the point of view of services team. But we'll be working through those on obviously a high, medium and low risk, but also trying to address those areas that have been out of use a long time. So they may be low risk, but if they've been out of use for longer than 12 months, I'm keen to get those back into place. And what I don't like to see around the city is Harris fencing around play areas. So, my incentive is to try and make sure that we start to address those as soon as possible.
Follow up, I suppose you say a significant backlog. Would 10% of play areas are affected? 20%? Just to get a bit of a scale. Because obviously those play areas, they're very ambitious, these proposals. I thoroughly support them, but obviously making sure our existing play facilities are safe, accessible, etc. Of those pressures. The 100k going to be enough, both to service the 44 play areas, but also the ongoing maintenance of the ambitious scheme?
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult question to answer purely because it's not a case of play areas being out of use. It's only specific pieces of equipment in those areas. So, for instance, we've had the recent issue with Heather Close, where we've had to take the decision to close that just in the short term until the play bark is delivered. But everywhere else we've got an issue in the city, it's a case of normally one piece of equipment being out of use. But I think the issue is that the length of the time that some of those pieces of equipment have been out of use is the priority for us to address now. I suppose the other part of it as well, Simon, is that we're getting to a point where certain pieces of equipment are reaching end of life as well. And so that's where that, following on to your next question, is more of an issue, because £100,000 across 44 play areas, obviously, as you can appreciate, doesn't go a long way. So we have to prioritise what we're going to do then, rather than being in a position where we can do it all. And the challenge with that is that it also comes with that balance of not only are we trying to maintain the existing estate, but we've got areas which, because they're reaching end of life, need fairly significant investment as well. And that may be where you're looking at a single piece of equipment. It could also be locations where you're looking at a significant number of pieces of equipment. In fact, potentially, the whole area kind of thing. So that's the challenge for us, is in meeting that balance.
Yeah, just to pursue the topic, I suppose, it seems very tight with inflation and other pressures. I don't know, I still haven't got a scale of the challenge of the number equipment that needs. I understand it's not whole play areas, but it sounds like quite a lot, and 100 probably not. So I think from a community, certainly want to understand what is the extent of the backlog and what's the plans to address it. And high, medium, low priority from safety and, but also the revenue impact of some of these new proposals. What is realistically the council's going to be financially quite considerable time, I suspect. So understanding that, so we can revenue.
Yeah, we have got, when I refer to the 100,000 annual budget, that is correct. However, we have got some additional funds available because of the backlog. So because some of that work wasn't completed, that funding has continued to roll forward. So we have got a larger pot of money in order to go back retrospectively and deal with some of those issues that weren't solved originally. Obviously puts us in a better position. But yes, and again, obviously from the point of view of the revenue implications of whatever new projects we deliver, then that's going to be something that we're going to have to build into the business case for each project as we bring it forward.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I was going to say we absolutely agree and understand the question being discussed. Fairness to Alan, since we've made him the single point of being very busy getting to grips with everything, I was thinking about it's quite a long time between now and the next. I think if you wouldn't mind, we circulated you a bit more of a detailed briefing, because I know that that's a ward level issue that hits your inboxes, but we could circulate that sooner rather than later, so it gives you more of an update. That'd be helpful.
Thank you. Owen.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks to Mr. New for the report and for his patience with me. That's all way thing. Just a question on point 3.3 to do with the funds for Cotswold Way. I'm just wondering if there's been any further development regarding conversations with third parties like Natural Networks and Platform about possible match funding that was mooted, hasn't seemed to have got off the ground yet. I just wonder if we were any further down the road with that.
It was a colleague of mine that made contact with Natural Networks, so the supervisor at City Services has been in touch with them. My understanding is that their criteria has changed and that the funding allocation that they're now giving out to projects is much smaller. However, the environmental enhancement works that we're due to carry out, and there is a fairly detailed report on that, which I can provide you if you've not already seen that to date. And that identifies about £11,000 worth of work, but from within City Services, we are going to pick up and cover the cost of that work internally, because the work involved in going through the Natural Networks application for the funding that we would be allocated, we want to just be able to get on and do the work now, because this is the time of year from the environmental enhancements that we want to do it. So it's between November and March. So we don't want any more delays to that work, and given the value of it, we'd just rather get on and deliver it now. Platform. Unfortunately, I can't give you an update on that one, just because Lloyd Griffiths has been dealing directly with Platform on that one, and I've not had a chance to catch up with Lloyd, so I'll have to come back to you on that one with an answer.
Thanks both. I've got Hannah, Eleanor, Tom, and then Jessie. So Hannah.
Thank you, Chair. I'm really grateful, Alan, that you're coming out to Gallivart Park, because the children hound me on a daily basis, when will this particular thing get fixed? And it's really important that you're coming to see them and hearing their voice. So very much look forward to tomorrow. Let's hope it doesn't rain. I was wondering about the end of life for the play equipment. Was a lot of it installed around the same time? I understand other district councils face problems when there's a massive amount of funding, everything gets put at the same time, and then everything reaches end of life at the same time. Will we be doing rolling work so that we don't end up in a financial difficulty in 10 years? Thank you.
Thanks. It isn't a case that everything reaches end of life at the same time because, as you can imagine, across an estate of 44 locations, you know, they've been developed over quite a wide timescale. But we are in a position where we have got some locations that are reaching end of life. So, you know, clearly we are going to, again, have to look to focus our work on those areas. But I'm keen, I mean, my role is fairly new to this. Formally, it commenced on the 1st of October, so you can see how new it is really. So what I'm going to be doing over the course of the next few months is kind of just getting my head around the whole history of the PSS Live system, how that information is recorded, whether that is the best system for us. If it is, what we can do from a housekeeping point of view to make sure that the information provides us with the concise detail that we need so that we can pull those reports off and give us the information to hand. But also to get out and visit all the sites as well and start to create photographic libraries of the sites and all of that. So there's a whole range of actions that I've kind of tasked myself over the coming months in order to, you know, start to make a dent in this work.
Thank you both. Eleanor?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've got three small questions, if I could. The first one is in relation to the proposed Batten Hall pump track. It's proposed that the track is going to be 100 metres in length in total, but you're talking about, in your report, you've referred that you've had some cost estimates come through, which I appreciate you're not going to disclose as at the moment, but are we in danger, given the estimates that you've got, are we in danger that that pump track is going to be significantly smaller because of the costings? That's the first question. The second one is in relation to the consultation that's ongoing at the moment. A significant amount of phone calls from residents who are unable to access the consultation for various reasons. Can they, or can I print out a hard copy and give it to them, collect it if necessary? And then the third issue is looking at all the projects that we've got, and I know that there's a desire for this council to be more accessible, inclusive to children and young people with additional needs. I see no mention anywhere of communication boards. You've mentioned interpretation boards, but they are extremely different to a communication board. And shouldn't that be a policy that we have going forward, that there should be communication boards on all areas of play? Because they are so important to make this city accessible and inclusive to children and young people with additional needs.
In terms of the distance of the track, I think at the moment, to answer that question, that will be determined by access to the site. So I think at the moment, from a budget point of view, probably the biggest challenge that we face is access to the site. You'll know yourself that, you know, the options are limited and the distances involved are fairly significant. So to answer the question, I think that at the moment, in terms of delivering the track itself in the location, delivering the track within budget is achievable. It's whether those transportation costs cause us a problem that mean that it means the track would have to be reduced in size, whether then that makes it still viable. So it's that distance, it's that transportation of materials which will be the biggest challenge, I think, for us on that one. In terms of consultation, yes, by all means, if there's anything that we can do to facilitate, you know, the printing off of hard copies and getting them to a location locally that would help. If I could maybe contact you separately, and then we'll put something in place to resolve that one. And then on the final element, the interpretation boards were relevant to Cotswold Way. The intention with Batten Hall Park, information board rather than an interpretation board, as well as all of the other ancillary facilities like the seating and that. So that's my understanding.
sorry, I'm really being pedantic and I don't mean to have a go, but a communication board is so different to, are you familiar with, just for me, that they're a compulsory piece of equipment in Wales, as I've just been told. You know, why are we not having them as standard? It's not an interpretation board. It's not about, you know, it's got Makaton signs. It can make such a big difference to children. And even to those children who are sort of 18 months onwards, who are non-verbal, that will help them to communicate. So I just think that we need to be a bit more proactive and a bit more ambitious about those items really in our play strategy.
Absolutely agree. I think that's one of the things that, again, comes out of the Worcester Play Plan, and something that we're kind of very keen to address moving forward. So again, consulting with the right groups locally as well to make sure that we provide the information, because again, information coming back through the place changes, consultation, and the public sessions that we did, again, you know, raised the issue that experience be very different if that type of information is readily available. Obviously, we're coming from a standing start in that respect, but it is certainly something that we need to look at and develop over the coming years.
Chair, if I may, just on that point specifically, Councillor, we want to get off on the right basis with this and learn and get things right. So appreciate your intervention. We had asked Scope, the national charity, how to approach the sort of standards of provision that we are not meeting and we should be meeting. And we had a good discussion with them for quite a long time on a call about the different standards that are out there, and they felt very happy that there's a benchmark. So very happy to share those and make sure that that's covered as part of the sort of implementation, because this is coming back for a final approval. But there is that sort of recognition that we've got to get it right, and we've got quite a lot to learn, I think, in Worcester about that. So I'm really open to all suggestions, genuinely am. What we have struggled with is there are lots of different views and schools of thought. So we've been trying to work out what the consensus is, and we went back to sort of scope standards, having explored things. Very happy to share that and learn as we go along.
Thank you, everybody. Tom?
Thank you very much, Chair. I have two questions. Should I do them one by one, if it's okay? They're both directed to Alan. Yeah. Thank you. So on the subject of accessibility and consulting with local partners and also Scope, which is fantastic because they have a brilliant reputation and expertise in this area. I wondered, so Horizon Hub and the improvements, enhancements made to that play area there. You've got Fort Royal Community Primary School there, and you've got Newbridge School there. What about consulting these guys? I'm not a member for that area as you know, but I do have an intimate knowledge of it. I know that buses taking children from Fort Royal Primary to various locations in the city and beyond creates an almighty traffic on top of whatever happens in front of Newbridge and also Wilds Lane. And if you throw other things happening on Midland Road, it's quite a busy road in terms of the access. So I think this would be a really good starting point in sort of making sure that the local partners are consulted properly. Perhaps if there is space to include them in the usage of those facilities there, that would be a good start. Just a quick comment. The word mapping has been used here. Is it possible, please, to ask some maps for the next updates on this program? Simply because I think it would be beneficial for the report as well to give almost a 3D aspect to it. So that's a comment and a question in terms of consulting local partners. I've got another.
Chair, can I just make a reflection on the point about consulting with schools? And I think it's a really interesting point, and it's an area where we'd really appreciate support from councillors. Some of the committee will know we do find it difficult to get schools' engagements on our and on the play consultation, which we ran for quite a period of time and we extended. We emailed schools, we wrote them a personalised letter, colleague even went into a couple of schools to try and help. The data on place changes shows that only 3 schools engaged with the consultation. So we had a similar experience in other council services, and I don't want to be on record saying schools aren't engaging with the City Council, but I think it would be fair to say that you've got to get that point where the school's priorities align with the council before they really have the time to engage with us. And we have tried genuinely to engage with them on projects like this. It hasn't borne much in the way of output, and there might be something about working at a really local level and trying to make connections at a really local level, including through the good offices of our elected members, try and get those conversations going, because we just don't see that return rate and response rate when we do. Play strategy was a case in point.
Thank you very much, Chair Allen and Shan as well. I think schools are busy as they are. Being married to a teacher, I know she's more involvement than anything else. So, point taken. I think what I'm talking about is this community-based asset approach, and perhaps utilising us more so than doing circular letters. Quick question on Battenhall Park, and it has to do with the contingency planning. So the location as it is suggested, it's a citywide consultation, so everybody's invited to have a view on this. I don't think there's an issue about the need for a pump track in Worcester. I think it's a fantastic idea, and there will be much of an argument on this, but do you have contingency planning thinking behind a strong response? And I'm not trying to sort of predetermine what this response is going to be on things like traffic chaos in the area. There is no place to park if you want to come to a pump track in the middle of Battenhall Park. Nowhere to park if people are traveling by car. If you don't travel by car, that's much easier because there are excellent ways to get there by cycle or by foot. So what's the contingency thinking behind the location of that? Is there scope for rethinking it? And some.
You've got me at a slight disadvantage in that I've inherited this project from a colleague who recently left, so I don't know the original kind of history to the process at the beginning. Kind of considered. I know that the perception is that the majority of users will come on wheels, etc. But I can appreciate the fact that because it is a citywide facility, there is undoubtedly going to be a demand from people located all around the city to site. At this stage, I've not had the chance to go out and do the visit, and it might be worth me going and doing that with the ward councillors to just get a feel for what those access points look like and what the potential is for parking and the impact upon local residents.
Somebody who's presenting the bordering ward, I can assure you that there's a lot of Battenhall rides. That's what
Right, Jessie?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you so much for this plan. I am very pleased to see it come through, and I'm very supportive of all the work that the council has been doing on this. Just because I represent an area that is not in the initial projects, just wanted to ask you for a very quick update, and thank you for all the information you've already given me prior to this meeting. Just a very brief update on the improvements or the work that is taking place in the Perdiswell Park play area and the Savrina Avenue. Not a lot of detail, but just so the residents know what's going on then.
In terms of Purdyswell Park, I've had confirmation today that the contractor will be on site on the 28th of November, and that will resolve the problem with the current issue with the roundabout, which is the only piece of equipment that is out of use at the moment. We've also placed an order to get the missing propeller from the Spitfire plane replaced. That's been missing for a while now, and that work the order's just been placed as well, so that work will be completed in the next few weeks. Sabrina, I still need to catch up with the city services supervisor on that one, so I'll come back to you on that one in the next couple of days.
My second question is regards with the Horizon Hub. You've mentioned that there's some plans or ideas to put a polymeric surface down. I just wonder, I don't know very much about these surfaces, but whether the danger of microplastics and the impact that they might have on the environment is something that will be taken into account before making those decisions.
Yes, with the polymeric surface, it's a cured product, so it's quite different to the type of loose material you get on, say, for instance, an artificial football pitch. So when they lay the surface, it's a troweled surface and it's a sealed product, so you don't get any kind of breakdown of the surface in that respect. So you don't get that transfer of any microplastics.
Thank you, Jesse. And Owen.
Thanks, Chair. Just going back to what Councillor Round raised a minute ago about the difference between communication boards and information boards. And I must admit, I'm still not au fait with the difference. Could somebody give me an example of one of these communication boards that I can look at and then I'll know what's what? Is that all right?
Right. Thank you, everybody. If we could move on, that's fine. Thank you again for the report. There's obviously a lot more work to do. I think we were looking at a 10-year plan originally. Some of us hopefully will be around to see the end of it. But thank you. So there are one recommendation on this. I think it's largely noting. Are we happy to take the three notes in as one item? Yep, thank you, everybody. Second agenda item then, and apologies for taking so long over that one. Hopefully we can move through the agenda slightly quicker. Review of museum hours. Thank you, Philippa.
Oh, thank you. This is to look at the opening hours of the two city-owned museums, the Commandery and Worcester City Art Gallery. Basically, both of them are a central part of our tourist offer here in Worcester, both to tourists and to visitors to the city, but also to our local residents. The research that we did last year showed that we bring in 2.4 million of spend from the visitors into other businesses in the local area. So it's a significant economic development to museums in the city. And so it's important that we get the offer right for the visitors that we have coming in to make sure that they're getting the offer that is appropriate for them. We've had the same opening hours in the museums now for well over 15 years. And they're very different. The one at the Commandery represents really a tourist offer. It's very much looking at a weekend visit, the extra time there that visitors can spend over a Saturday and a Sunday. Whereas the City Art Gallery Museum really is sitting there looking like the museum that used to be on top of the library. It's very much that local people used to pop in from time to time. And in that decade, since the library moved out to the Hive, we've seen really quite a significant change for how art gallery museum visitors have been. They've changed from being very much that local visitor to being, I'd say about now 50-50, about being that local visitor and being people coming in specifically to see our exhibitions. And so really it's time to look at these. We formally review the visitor patterns about every 5 years. And now is really, I think, enough time that there's been enough change that it's time to make a change to those hours. I have to say I would not recommend changing the museum or any attraction hours very often. Listing and visitors' memories really go on for a long time, and if you change them regularly, then people will just lose track of when it is that you're open at all, and you'll create confusion and unhappiness. So I think you need to reach a critical mass of needing to change to get to that point. And I think we're at that point now, so this is why I'm bringing this report to suggest that we make some change. The current hours, as you can see, are in the table in 2.5, and you can see quite how different the two sites are. And what we did over the last sort of 18 months really is we did a lot of observation of when visitors were coming in, when particularly different schools, different groups, when spend was happening in the shops. And then we looked at that alongside visitors in the city as well. There's quite a lot of footfall monitors across the city that give a sense of particularly when people are using the city as a whole. And you can see absolutely over the last 10 years of how we've been reviewing this that things have changed, particularly at weekends. A decade ago, Sunday was by far and away the quietest day across the city centre, and that has now changed, that it's now on par with weekdays. And I suspect if this, the momentum continues, that we'll be in a position in a couple of years' time where Sundays will be, potentially as popular as the other weekend. So there are some key bits that really came out of this review. It particularly was important that it included the Canaletto exhibition that we did at the end of last year, which was our kind of pilot blockbuster. And really that was bringing visitors in from certainly across the region, to some extent across the country. And we even had a couple of visitors that visited specifically to see it from the USA. So that really was bringing those tourists into Worcester. And we particularly had quite a lot of comments over that exhibition about the fact that we weren't open on a Sunday. There are some other things that are important here as well. The Art Gallery Museum is it's the biggest business or the biggest attractor at that north end of the city. And there's a lot now of small, creative, independent businesses at the north end of the city who really, we need to be supporting them by bringing footfall to that end of the city. That's one of the roles that we can have there as the Art Gallery Museum. And they're actually the survey that we did of those businesses means they're almost universally not open on a Mondays because of the fact that they work specifically with that weekend audience. There is no point, therefore, in us bringing footfall to that end of the city if we're not then able to benefit the other businesses. And there's some other practical things that we discovered within this, that nearly a third of all of our visitors arrive within the first hour of when we open, which suggests that museum visitors tend to be early risers, that they want to be there at the beginning of the day, and that practically we were maybe not providing with the exact right hours that we should have been doing overall. So I set out in 2.7 those conclusions of where we come, that really we think that there's some things that we do are right, that seasonal closure is exactly where we are right at the moment. There's definitely that potential to open on a Sundays and reflectively to close on Mondays, which is a very common way that museums across the world open actually, and that really aligns much more with that north end of the city. And that we then look at that visitor demand to open and close slightly earlier in the day and to open longer on Sundays. So I've set out in 3.1 the proposed change. The key part, I guess, within this is to say that very simple message. We want really both museums to be open the same hours so that it's a straightforward message to give to tourists, to put in listings for the Tourist Information Centre to be able to talk to visitors as they're coming in the city. It needs to be easy to remember. It's not which one is open at 10:30 and which one's open at 10. It's a straightforward way of working. And that we, as a result, we end up with a better offer across the weekend that really is servicing that tourist visit into, well, and frankly, residents who work during the week as well, to come into their museums. We've obviously got a position across the council that we are looking at saving rather than spending where we can. And so this gives us a slightly more efficient position where we are more aligned to where our visitors actually want us to be open. And so there's a small saving to be found. Although this is not primarily about making visitors want them.
Thank you, Philippa, for that. Hannah first, Owen, and then Helena.
Chair. I absolutely welcome the museum being open on Sundays. There's been many rainy Sundays where I've thought, what shall I do with my small children? I wondered a little bit whether it would be better to have more prudent to have it 11 till 4, as people sometimes will be doing things in the morning. I was thinking about weekend visitors checking out of hotels around that sort of time, people going to church, etc. Whether, you know, and some people like a lie-in on a Sunday morning, whether it would be better to do 11 till 4 on a Sunday. And I wondered if you were still going to do your amazing Friday.
So we look quite carefully about Sundays, and actually 11 till 4 is a really good question as to whether it was the right one. There's no doubt about it, the city footfall falls off really quite quickly towards the end of the day. And so, and indeed, the commandery visitors absolutely kind of drop off towards the end. So our impression from that was that, again, the museum visitors do seem to be more of an early riser than perhaps you might anticipate. So which was why we've suggested the 10 till 3 rather than the 11 till 3. So at the moment, the commandery is open 11 till 3 on a Sunday, and they are still more popular at the beginning of that than they are at the end. So there is absolutely, we're more popular at the end of that day than we are on other days. So, you know, I can absolutely see there is an argument there. And I think in the long run, if we are able to make this successful and to bring in additional income because of that success, we should look at extending those hours on the Sunday. Your other question was about Friday nights. So, so we've been building up, for those in the room who are not regular visitors on a Friday night museum after hours, please do come because they're great fun. We've been building up this sort of a museum late, which is quite a typical thing that a lot of the London museums do as a Friday night kind of informal entertainment the museum, and we found it's particularly successful over the summer months. I think, you know, when it gets darker, people are less keen to come out, but actually on a summer evening, it's a lovely opportunity to come and have a cocktail in the museum and enjoy an exhibition in a slightly different environment. They've been particularly successful this year. They were incredibly successful alongside the 1980s exhibition. And I think we will aim to absolutely continue those, particularly in the summer months alongside that summer.
Thank you both. Owen?
Thanks, Chair. I'm not sure if it's the done thing to mention another agenda item in this agenda item, but in agenda item 8, it tells us that there's been a 40% increase in museum visitors and a 50% increase in museum revenue. And I'm just wondering, are we sure that those trends are going to continue if we're reducing the opening hours by a couple of hours? Because those trends in agenda item 8, page 36 and 37, look very good to me. 40% increase in footfall, 50% increase in revenue. They look pretty impressive, and I want to know that they're going to continue if we're playing around with the opening hours.
I think it's a really good point, and we for now, the earned income element of our budget is, you know, is significantly big. In fact, we at the commandery, for example, our earned income is higher than our staff bill. So, you know, it does have an impact. If we hit the earned income, then there is a risk that then we are in a very difficult position where we have a budget that doesn't add up anymore. So we have looked at this really carefully and have included the additional earned income spend within there. So you know, we've looked at exactly the hours at which, when you get spend in the shop, when we the earned income that we have is both admissions, shop, cafe, school visits, activity sessions, all of these things, cocktail sales on Friday nights. So we've looked at it in quite a lot of detail to make sure that we don't think that yes, while we will have a small change, a reduction in hours across the week, we don't think that those are the reduction in the spending hours. So, I mean, it's one of these things where there is a risk, and, you know, I feel like I've done significant due diligence in order to make sure I've got this right. But you're right to point out that it's a risk.
Again, thank you. Eleanor?
Thank you, Chair. Just as a clarification, on the proposed new hours, I know that currently you do bank holiday Mondays. Are those going to stop, or are you going to be open on bank holiday Mondays?
So we're open on bank holiday Mondays at the Commandery, but not at the Art Gallery and Museum, and I would anticipate doing the same thing going forward. My aspiration long-term would be for us to be able to open at the Art Gallery and Museum on bank holidays as well, and I think what we will start off by doing is piloting that on some particular bank holidays when we think that will be popular. One of the big things I try very hard not to do is compete with myself between the two different museums anywhere. So the Commandery has got an excellent set of attractions going on bank holidays, and the last thing we want to do is to dilute that, I suppose. It will be carefully looking at the balance across the museums to make sure we're getting it right, and when we pilot it.
Simon?
Just from a simplicity of marketing message, I just wondered, and it's picking up Hannah's, for whether you're a late riser or an early riser, wouldn't it just be simple to have it 10 till 4 on the Sunday? If you think about stores opening, a lot of stores open 10 till 4, broadly those times. So a marketing simplicity of message that our weekday opening hours will be matched on our Sunday. Just says we're open 10 till 4 days. I take the point that you've obviously done quite a lot of analysis, types of people who are visiting the museum at the moment. So if we're thinking of new people who might be, just wonder whether, rather than making the saving, whether we could file the times to be the same. What would be the cost implication of doing that?
So it would be more expensive than it currently is. Opening on Sundays is more expensive than it is opening the rest of the week because so it would be more expensive than we currently are. Clearly, I'm very happy to look at it, but I think that the solution is that we work into that as we continue to earn income to make sure that we can pay for it. Unless anyone more than me would at this point would like to say that no, you can spend as much money as you'd like. Yeah, I think you know, ultimately this contributes to the museum's element to
the difference just in terms of our. Well, because obviously this makes a saving, as we haven't automatically accounted for. What would be the implication of opening an extra hour? Just to give the committee a bit of a...
I would have to go and work at it in detail, but it will be somewhat.
It's not dramatic in that sense. I just wonder whether, I know that times are tight, but actually this is an area we want more people to come in over the weekend. I think you've demonstrated there's some demand in the city. Maybe for a few £1,000 worth filing for, let's say, a year, just to. Anna made a compelling case about even if it's over a particular month's year.
Before I move on to the next question, then, perhaps we might consider as a committee delegating the final decision on the hours, on the final opening hours to Philip comes up with the information.
Lord Chairman, I just think it's useful, if the committee is going to do anything, it's to help provide a bit of challenge and suggestions. So I think there's a useful suggestion that won't want to be lost.
Thank you, Simon. I won't take all the credit for that idea, though. Thank you. Jill.
Thank you, Chair. It's traditional that I mention turn right at this point when we talk about the museums, so I want to stick with that. Are you able to get your name on that board when it goes up?
I mean, clearly, part of what I'm saying here, isn't it, is that we want to encourage more people to turn right. I don't know whether at any point Zoe is going to take the opportunity to talk about the cultural compact that the city is working on, but I would say turn right at Moorgate Street is sort of being subsumed into that wider cultural discussions. But I am absolutely fully determined that yes, we encourage more people to turn right out of Foregate Street. And obviously when Foregate Street looks more beautiful, as it will do very shortly, it will give much more of that.
James, then Adrian.
Chair, thank you. Really, just to underline what colleagues from around the table, so to speak, have been saying. Alignment for me is just so logical, it's almost, you know, hardly worth saying. The other point is that Sundays are so critically important to the city, and the opportunity to make it easier for people coming to our city to visit our museum and art gallery. We should embrace that you know, as much as we possibly can. And I accept the arguments about cost, etc. I get that. To me, the key point is, and we've spoken about this over the years, is creating that link between our offering in this sense, so that those people who are, you know, planning their weekend out know that they can actually go to a number of different sites, for want of a better way of describing them, that it is, you know, as humanly as possible, it is possible for them to do that. And they're going to be here on a Sunday. They're not necessarily going to be here, you know, on a working day to the same extent, although, you know, many people from the city use the facilities when they wish. So I would, you know, I'm happy with the suggestion of chair and vice chair. I kind of get that as well. And I just want us to sort of maximise the opportunity here without, you know, the museum and art gallery. It's done some fabulous work. Philippa comes every year and tells us, you know, and it's great stuff that's going on there. So yeah, really focusing on getting the whole thing aligned would be my sort of key point here. And, you know, really trying, you know, get to the grips of where we can, you know, really push on our offer to people come from outside the city as well.
Thank you, James. Adrian.
Thanks, Chair. A couple of things. Firstly, Sunday is different, and most people actually want to keep Sundays different. The ability to spend time on a Sunday shopping and in leisure centres and everything is absolutely what we expect these days, but is also, there's an expectation that they are still a little bit different. And having a different set of hours on a Sunday is really not that complicated for most of the visitors of our museums anyway. I'm not sure about people in the room. The other issue for me is certainly about the budget saving, which will be hacked into. So, you know, if you're going to alter that, I think the Joint Museums Committee would certainly be looking for some guarantees that the City Council will not be coming back to the Joint Museums Committee and asking for that money, having offered it up in this way. So that would be a significant thing for me as chair of the committee. And I think the other thing is clearly that although the powers for opening hours rest with this committee, it is the Joint Museums Committee which effectively oversees and manages the museum service, and a lot of work has gone into the proposals and the discussion that we had at the Joint Committee. We did not raise those issues, so I would be reluctant to see a proposal that was different to what's on the table.
Thank you, Adrian. So the recommendation in front of the committee then.
I think, Chair, we had a different recommendation. Sorry for being a pedant, but I think we were suggesting that we delegated responsibility to have a look at it. I take his point about budget, but I think we have a committee for a reason. This is something that's reserved to the committee. So we've had a discussion. Recommendation as it is. But I think we do want you to explore that. I'm sorry for pushing the point, but I think there's actually quite a number of us on the committee that feel something other than recommendations.
And that's fine. Thank you, Simon. I'm just trying to work out how we were going to get that decision reflected. If with everybody's permission, I guess we'll have to go through the process of amending a recommendation, but I'm suggesting that we change recommendation 1.2 to delegate authority to chair and vice chair regarding the opening hours once costs have been established. So I'll propose that as a...
What everyone wants at this point is a constitutional geek, isn't it? I'm really sorry. What it technically would be delegate authority to the managing director in consultation with chair and vice chair to Jane. I'm very sorry to be so tedious.
There are varying degrees of pedantry, and I will bow to yours, Sean. So thank you. I won't repeat that, but we'll just put the amendment through for the vote, if that's all right for everybody. Everybody happy with that as an amendment? Right, that's marvellous. In that case, then, can I just see the support for recommendations 1.1 and the amended 1.2? Thank you, Adrian. That was, to me, unanimous, at least from this position. Thank you, everybody. On to the next item of the agenda. Everybody's riveted by this, the budget. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Chair. It falls to me to put a dampener on any debate. We are, for those of you who are not new to this process, what we try to do in terms of setting the budget is to give an opportunity for everybody to engage in the process. So this is the sort of starting point for that, where we look at the budgets for each of the committees and identify those projects which are relevant to the committee and also the capital items of spend which are relevant too. And the idea basically is not to have a debate at this stage, but simply to put the information on the table for people to see the areas that we are likely to come under discussion. And then when we come back in January, that's the point where we'll then say, well, what ideas, what do we want to change, what do we want to do differently, what's going to be added, and so on and so on. Obviously, members will be aware that this year in particular, we've been looking hard at how we can reduce our ongoing revenue spend. And the set of savings which have come through to date, which are shown in the table on paragraph 3.4, so for those items which are relevant to this committee, they're around about £98,000 proposed less spending than there were this time last year. Now those relate to those are itemised underneath the table. In terms of the non-VR staff changes, those are in particular where we've an employee who's retired and that we're now buying in marketing support rather than replacing that post. So that's given us a £10,000 saving. Many of the non-statutory services, for the most part, the savings are small items, changes in budgets, and just shaping our things a little bit better than they were previously. And a number of areas of income increase, some of which have gone through to committee previously for discussion, policy and resources, for instance, more sponsorship of Christmas lights and charges for the Victorian Fair and so on. So there are a few big ticket items in relation to this committee. They're mainly small items, which all add up bit by bit, so they're all welcome. People have worked really, really hard to get us to this stage, and we want to continue that work as we go through the budget. The detailed items for spend within this committee are Appendix 1. So if you're interested in any of those areas, want to know more about them, then by all means, contact me or Mark Baldwin, or drop me an email, or just let us know in between now and when we come back in January, and we're happy to talk through the spend there and what's in those spend budgets in more detail. The appendices, similarly, in terms of the capital programme, are just trying to reflect what's in the programme, the areas that we're spending money on, and again, happy to talk in more detail about some of that. Obviously, things like the Future High Streets Fund and the Towns Fund are the big parts of the capital programme, which fall to the committee for discussion, and also policy and resources, depending on the scale of those. So there's a lot of interest there, and we've debated those through the year. And then the final one is in respect of earmark reserves. And I've mentioned several times, occasionally people say, well, we've got a lot of earmark reserves. Why have we got so much pressure on budget? But this is a really good example of the 866,000 of reserves which applied to this committee. 80% of those are in one line, which is a commitment for the Keepax Bridge, which we are fully committed to. So that is not going to be released as a reserve. That's already so. But there are some items in there where we may say have changed, or there's no further spending required on that. And we have a meeting coming up in the next few days with group leaders to go through those earmark reserves and understand what we do need to change and what we can free up to fund other things. So we'll come back in January with a list of potential sources of funding for changes in revenue which are coming up in the future. So, as I say, it's really not for debate now. It's more about information, just to make sure everybody knows what page we're on, and happy to come back in January and talk about it in more detail. But in the meantime, if anybody wants to ask any questions or clarify anything, then by all means, get in touch. I'm happy to talk you through it. Yeah?
Thank you, Shane. Sorry, I'm speaking without my mic on. Shall we just move on to the recommendations then? And it's a noting report, so can we just assent to noting it? Thank you very much. Thank you, Shane. Next item on the agenda then is the performance report for Q2.
I'm happy to present it, Chair.
Thank you, Shane.
In simple terms, I'll just state that this is the next iteration of our performance scorecard for this year. Colleagues available in the room are able to answer any detailed questions that members will have on the report. I'm happy to leave it at that.
Thank you, Shane. I note, Owen, you've already mentioned the museum figures, yeah. And I guess we can understand where we are with the four-gate arches, the moves on to demolish that building. The economic development strategy, I believe, we've put on hold until next year. Zoe?
Yes, until after the election, so we won't know our focus for it. 12 months, but it doesn't mean we won't be working on the economic development targets that we've got.
And then the review of the South Worcestershire Development Plan, I guess. Duncan, you can highlight where we are with that.
Through you, Chair, as members will be aware, the South Worcestershire Development Plan review was submitted to the Planning Inspectorate in September of this year, and we are now engaging with the planning inspectors through the programme officer to arrange for the start to be as currently scheduled early next year.
Thank you, Duncan. Any questions on the performance scorecard? No, thank you. And again, this is a noting, so everybody's noting this report. Thank you, everybody. Next item on the agenda then is infrastructure funding through planning. Sian.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to introduce the report, the reasons for bringing it, and then hand over to Duncan, who will talk you through the detail. So something that has come up in briefings with Chair and Vice Chair has been an appetite to understand a little bit more about how the Section 106 allocation process has been working, really to supplement the annual look back that happens through the infrastructure funding statement. So it's necessary for the committee in any event to receive a report sort of after the event in the January, looking back at the previous calendar year, that records the Section 106 and community infrastructure levy funding that has been spent within the district. But nevertheless, we do understand from members, and I think it's a feature in Worcester, that members are very well connected to their wards and understand where there are genuine needs, and Section 106 could meet some genuine, very local priorities. So we, as officers, we absolutely agree that members need a good level of visibility of the information through on Section 106. Members will be aware that it isn't free money. It is planning constrained funding, and so the council, wearing its planning authority hat, must always determine the appropriate allocations. So we've brought this report as really a sort of scrutiny information item, but there is a recommendation that we would hand to this committee more power really to determine funding applications over 50,000. That's currently not something that's codified in our constitution. So we're responding to so it's really feedback on that. And we're anticipating that we might want to deploy a similar financial threshold for community infrastructure levy funding when we're able to bring that forward to you next year. So that's my high-level summary of why we've brought you this report, Chair, and I think Duncan will probably give you a flavour of some of the things that we've been transacting using our 106.
Thank you, Chair. Through you. The report before you this evening sets out the context for securing developer contributions, as Sian has just mentioned, through Section 106 legal agreements and also through community infrastructure levy. The relevant legal tests are explained at paragraph 2.2 of the report, and whenever we are dealing with financial contributions sought through new development, it's really important that we never lose sight of those legal tests. The report then sets out the Council's internal procedures, including, you'll all, I'm sure, be familiar with the Section 106 Programme Board, and I think it's a really useful opportunity to share with you at paragraph 2.7 a table of the spend over the last 12 months, a variety of projects, some significant, but others relatively small, but I hope you'll agree with me, making a meaningful difference to communities across the city, whether it's things like secure fencing around allotments, other matters like that. Some of you will see, if you're sitting members of planning committee, when those particular works require planning permission. But it's really important to see the role of the Section 106 Programme Board as a very much business as usual, efficient and effective internal process. But, nevertheless, when there are more significant projects, and particularly when through the play plan and some of the more significant Section 106 developer contributions can quite easily be in excess of £100,000, it is quite right in terms of good governance for matters like that committee. And that's because not only do we need to ensure that those funds are spent appropriately and completely in accordance with each individual Section 106 agreement, but very importantly, we need to plan across the city and ensure that strategically we meet the needs that have been identified, for example, in the play plan. So a lot of this will be about, we've done the hard work in one respect, approving the play plan. The job now is to implement it. So just to emphasise, whilst noting that the relatively small scale projects are generally under £50,000, referring you then to the recommendation at paragraph 1.1, if you'll indulge me a second, that the committee note the content of the report and agree that future requests for funding that are considered by the Section 106 Programme Board with a value exceeding £50,000 would in future be reported to the Place and Economic Development Committee for final approval. Just to spend a moment talking about community infrastructure levy as well as Section 106. At paragraph 213 of the report, it explains to you that there is an ongoing review of the community infrastructure levy charging schedule. That will be reported to this committee in January alongside the infrastructure funding statement. The IFS is something that we're required to publish each year, and that will be brought to this committee in January next year also. Just to explain that as far as the review of the community infrastructure levy charging schedule, assuming that that is approved in due course by this committee, that would then be the subject of a period of public consultation, typically 6 weeks. Then the new charging schedule would be submitted to the planning inspector, a lot like the South Worcestershire Development Plan Review has, for examination, and it's really important that those two things happen in parallel. A lot of the viability analysis that underpins the community infrastructure levy charges, the same evidence that underpins the South Worcestershire Plan Review. So, if I may then, just to take you back to paragraph 1.1 of the report, which is just to seek approval of a change to our current procedures, for which those more significant schemes would be this committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Duncan. Does anybody have any questions? Adrian.
I've got a question about Appendix 1. The Appendix 1 goes through lists of projects which have money with them, some of which have spent some money, some of which hasn't yet. And a number of them say no specific projects identified. And then it goes on to say specify. Are those two statements contradictory?
Chair, Councillor Gregson, I understand the question. They're not contradictory. The reason for that is that what we're saying in that appendix is that a specific project to spend the funding hasn't been identified, hasn't to date come through Section 106 Programme Board. However, the point I made a moment ago about the purpose which the Section 106 developer sought is really important in effect, us not incorrectly spending money. What the table seeks to do is set out what the purposes are, extracting that from each individual agreement. So in effect, for want of a better expression, that funding is ring-fenced. We need to make sure that we spend it in accordance with the 106 agreement and it was originally sought. That helps.
Yep. Yes, thank you. So if there's something in Appendix 1 that I've got a question about, who do I direct that question to make something happen?
Through you, Chair, to myself, and something like that would be taken through the Section 106 programme. I could look at the individual 106 agreement with you or any other member of this committee or of the council and identify the purposes for which the funding is sought, whether if you had a particular project in mind, whether that would be likely to be eligible. Then in order to bring a project forward, we would work with a colleague like Alan New to see whether that project could be developed, brought forward.
Sian.
Chair, I'm sure people have already digested the appendix, but just as an example of that no specific project and then specific allocation, an example was the open space contribution that was collected on the fire station development. And now we have a project to apply that to, which is the redevelopment of St Andrew's Gardens just over the road in Copenhagen Street. So there's a time lag between the collection and the development of the project, but that specifically meets that planning obligation and those terms. So I appreciate you probably already grasped that that's the sort of time lag, but that's a nice tangible recent example of the project coming forward that meets the terms and it being a really meaningful and good value use of that funding.
Okay, nothing further. The recommendation is that the committee note the content of this report and agree that future requests for funding that are considered by the Section 106 Programme Board with a value exceeding £50,000 will be reported to Place and Economic Development Committee for final approval. Oh, sorry, Shane.
Sorry, not to be outdone on the pedantry statement. The financial regulations Part 8A say that any commitments 50,000 from reserves need approval from the Policy and Resources Committee. So the recommendation is to state to this committee for approval and referral on to policy.
So the amendment is that we replace the full stop at the end with "and referral on to P&R." I hope that's correct wording. Marvellous. Everybody happy with that amendment? Marvellous. Can we take a view then on the recommendation as amended? Do believe that's unanimous, not anonymous, unanimous. Thank you, everybody. Final item of the agenda then, everybody, is UK SPF project allocation review. Over to you, Zoe.
Thank you, Chair. We are now coming into the planning for the third year of the UK SPF programme. The money is centred around three main priorities, so it's community in place, people and skills, and local business. Now, we haven't been able to allocate any funding to people and skills until the final year. So when we pulled together our investment plan last year, all of the majority of the early allocations were all centred around community and business. However, we identified certain priorities that we thought would meet the skills element for the final year. We've now done a review. They are still very similar. We have still got the same similar identified skills needs. We have had a new local skills improvement plan that's been recently released that was delivered by the Hereford and Worcester Chamber of Commerce, which also highlights very much the sort of skills gaps we thought we'd already identified. And we have reviewed against other Heart of Worcester and the university and all of their findings to make sure that we are focused in the right direction. However, we had lessened the money in our community and skills budget for the final year, but we still have some of those demands that aren't currently being met from that community and skills priority. So our suggestion is that actually we move some money from the people and skills and to cover some of those ongoing needs within the community and place priority. We will still have a number of activities and programmes that will meet those skills interventions, but we think we can do it at a lesser cost and also meet some of the community and skills ongoing needs. The request is that we are looking to move 100,000 from the people and skills priority into the community and place priority, and that we'll bring the recommendations of what projects get funded into those interventions at the next
Okay, thanks, Zoe. Simon?
Chair, I've just got a question as to what projects won't be funded, I suppose, out of the 100,000 that we're moving, because I thought the report made a very compelling case under 4 in terms of the needs analysis, particularly as we've got this additional information from the Chamber of Commerce, and we know that the labour market is very challenged at the moment. We need to help and support people, not just at a young age in terms of training, but throughout their professional life in terms of reskilling, etc. And we've seen such good investment in terms of through the Towns Fund into these new hubs. But then later in the report, you get to the point that says we'd need to double the support to cover all the centres. So whilst having the buildings and the assets are important, if we haven't got the people in there to deliver the skills training and additional support, then that would feel suboptimal. So I wonder whether the committee needs to see, yes, the community needs identified, but also the skills projects that would be trading off before finally making the switch. It might be that in the context of the overall budget setting, we just want what we're losing as well.
Having reviewed the skills projects that, and proposals that we've brought forward, we don't actually think we're going to need to lose any of the projects themselves. It's just that some of them may be done on a slightly smaller scale, but we think we can do all of the proposals and still have the money left over to put some money back into the community and place. I do think we can cover all of them.
Well, that's reassuring to hear, Charlie. It just, when you read it, it looked as if we wouldn't be covering tutors, coaches available. The kind of provision in these centres would be helping customers, clients, residents, skills they need at 4.12. So this would need to double to cover all the centres, and that's what led me to think, well, is this a wise move given skills are so important?
Yeah, we've sat down with WCT and gone through the projects, and we can actually cover the increase in tutors within the budget setting.
Very reassuring.
Thank you, Simon. Anybody else? Hannah?
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered about 6.5. There were no significant equality implications been identified. I wondered if there was issues in terms of gender pay gap and getting women back into work, and if that was being specifically.
Yeah, it is included in some of the project proposals that we've got bringing forward. So rather than seeing them as an issue, we'd actually already identified and was looking to address them anyway. So it is within the portfolio that will be looked at.
Okay. Nothing else? So we'll go through the recommendations one by one. The first one being to agree to transfer £100,000 from the Skills 2024-2025 funding allocation to the community priority. Just see support for that or otherwise. Thank you. And then secondly, agrees to receive a further report at its next meeting detailing delivery options for the skills and communities priorities identified. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Shane. Thank you, everybody. That was a great meeting. Look forward to seeing you next time.